Welcome to the Studio Chat podcast, the podcast designed to be your companion in the journey of self-discovery. I'm Barbara Thompson, your host, and a dedicated therapist. I'm the founder and owner of Self-Care Studio, a private counselling practice. With my clients, in courses that I create, on this podcast, I'm committed to ensuring that you have the support that you need. I created this podcast as a space for you to feel a sense of connection and a reminder that you're not alone in this thing that we call life, this adventure. This podcast is your weekly reminder to trust yourself, live life authentically, and embrace the path that is uniquely yours. Together, we'll explore ways to break free from people-pleasing, overthinking, allowing you to claim your time and energy to live life on your terms. You'll be joined by myself as I take you through some episodes, or during the year, I'll have some special self-care experts as guests on my podcast. So if you're ready to step into a life that's truly for you, join me on this journey. Let's navigate the twists and turns of life together, and more importantly, live your life for you. So thank you so much for choosing to spend some time with me today. Let the Studio Chat begin. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Studio Chat podcast. It's really nice to have you here today. Today we're going to switch things up and talk about something that on my podcast, it's quite female heavy. It's quite health conscious to do with our bodies. And we're going to go down a different road today. And we're going to talk about mental health for men with a therapist that has his own private practice. He's a social worker. His private practice is called Mindful Men. He has the Mindful Men podcast. I'd like to welcome Simon Rinne to the podcast. Hi, Simon.
Hey, Barbara. How are you going? It's really nice to be here.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you here and have a different perspective on things.
Absolutely.
Because we know it's same, different. And I think, we all have men in our lives, whether it's our neighbours, our cousin, our work colleagues, our partners, husbands, brothers, we can go down that list. And still with mental health, still with mindfulness, I feel like there's a heavy, with women too, to be honest, stigma of that doesn't work. Why on earth would I want to talk to a stranger? I'm going to keep everything bottled inside, or I don't need to talk to anyone. But everyone around you or someone that has a loved one in their life, I think, you're going to be able to help a lot of my listeners today with some helpful tips and insight into what you do. So to start with, I just want to let people know a little bit about, so you're in sunny Queensland. Now I'm not from Australia, but I do know this week there was a bit of an important game that happened and that you guys won. So I will mention that because I feel like New South Wales, I could not mention that. But with your work, I love what you bring to the table. Not only are you a social worker and you're trained to obviously hold space and be there for people, which not many people can do, but you've got this other beautiful side to you that you have gone through 35 years of your own personal mental health struggles. And I love that you're so open and honest about that. And also, at one point you were using alcohol to cope with life. And I know many of us do that, especially Australia and New Zealand culture. It's very normal. And then at 40, you got sober and embraced mindfulness to help you through this recovery journey. So we're just going to start about, I think one of the things I'd like people to know about is how you got into social work.
It's a good question. It's a long question. And first of all, this is a very timely conversation that we're having. As we're recording, it's the month of June. It's internationally, it's Men's Health Month. In some parts of the world, it's Men's Mental Health Month, depending on where you are. And some of the listeners might be going through their social media and going, why is there all this men's mental health stuff coming up? It's because of that. And next week, so I think we're recording on the 7th of June. So when this comes out, will be Men's Health Week here in Australia. So it's a week to recognise men's health issues. And as you said, we all know a man in our life. There has to be, for us to be born, there has to be a man involved at some point in some way. And so they're our brothers, they're our sons, they're our fathers, our uncles, our mates as well, our colleagues. So this is a really timely conversation. But for my journey into social work, And if you meet any social worker, they'll often say, you've been a social worker for life, because it's just the way that you're built and the way that you think about the world and conceptualize the world. For me, social work was a relatively late thing. It was a mature age study thing. So growing up, and then I went to university. I did a bachelor's of social science degree. I didn't know what kind of jobs resulted from that after high school and after university. And it was before Google was around, actually. I typed into Yahoo 7, I think it was the platform, or AOL, or what, that was the other one as well. What do people with a Bachelor of Social Science do? And the only thing that came up was government. And so I ended up in the public service, and I was there for about 10 to 15 years. Halfway through that career, though, I kind of had this moment where I'm like, I'm not climbing the ladder. I feel unfulfilled. I want to have greater impact on the world. I want to live with purpose. And it was around that time that I'm like, you know what? I've been living with mental health issues for a long time, ever since I was 8, and I'm 40 now. I want to work in that space. I want to work in the mental health space. I want to help people just like me. And when I say just like me, I'm really passionate about helping guys to break out of this stigma and shame that we have around talking around our mental health, because we can do so much better for ourselves. And when we think about men's mental health, we've had some horrific instances in the last few months. In fact, the last few years, we've got the stuff that happened in Bondi, the stabbing stuff. We've had family and domestic violence stuff. It's in the media. Men are angry, violent, and this is how we're portrayed. Men aren't those things. It's just that we really do struggle to talk about stuff. And when it often, unfortunately, comes to a point where we become volcanoes and we blow up, becomes too much. I think a lot of that is because we just don't have the words to talk about mental health, or we don't feel comfortable, we don't feel safe. And so I want to provide that safety and provide that comfort. Halfway through my career, was feeling unfulfilled, wanted to work in the mental health space, largely because of my own journey, but also because of what I can see in the community for men. And so I went to my local university here on the Sunshine Coast. I was actually looking at an occupational therapy career at that stage. My sister-in-law was going through that and sharing some of what she was learning, and I thought, oh, that's really interesting. But I landed on social work because I was looking for something that worked in mental health, but also had creative freedom. I had spent so long in the public service where I was working in career or a job that I had to do what other people told me to do. And that's good for a good pay packet. I had a great pay packet, but I'm a creative person as well. And that's why I podcast, for example. I'm creative and I like to try different things and experiment. And, in my work at Mindful Men, the therapy business, I do things a little bit differently because I get bored very easily. So social work jumped out at me because I had an out. If I got bored of working in mental health, I could go work in child protection or the hospitals or aged care or, something else. And so that's why I picked social work. And I finished that a couple of years ago now, my master's degree. And from there, as soon as I finished that degree, I basically clicked resign on my old public service career and started Mindful Men, the therapy business, which I've never had a business before. I'm still trying to figure it out 2 years in, but it is growing in leaps and bounds. But we still got a long way to get guys into the door to do therapy with me.
Yeah, and I hear that. I think it's hard. So my private practice, and that's why I became a counsellor. I could have become a psychologist for sure, but counsellor, I had the freedom. And it's interesting hearing you say you do things differently, because I know I do things differently. And I just, from my perspective of what I hear and what I know in my personal life, but also what I hear from women in a therapy setting, I think it's really hard for guys to be men today, because you go back to I don't know, as far back as the 70s, a guy will open a door for you and let you go through first, or let you have a seat, or I don't know, do those kind of things, which I still really like and I admire. But I hear a lot of feedback from people that I know when guys do that, they'll get, I can do it for myself, and get really like, don't. So I think especially any man, it doesn't matter if he's a teenager or like I'm 43, so I'm a bit older than you, but it's in that age bracket, no matter where a young man or a man sits right now, I think they're like, I've got to be sensitive, but not too sensitive. And then I've got to be masculine, but what does that look like? And it's like that real, like, I don't think women have such a strong definition of this is what we should look like, this is what we should do, and this is what we should be. And we're kind of still in that box, which I'm trying to break in my practice. And then we come along to your across the pond there with what you do with your guys. I think they're like, what am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to do? Okay, now I've grown up in a household where I have seen my dad kind of cry about his emotions, but then he'll still get drunk every night, or I won't see him for days and he'll come home, or there's just so much confusion. And I think anyone listening to this that have young boys that they're bringing them up, I think there's just everyone's so lost. Does this resonate with anything that you see?
Absolutely. What you're talking about is social constructions of what it means to be a man and a boy and a girl and a woman. Like, I was actually talking about this today on another podcast that I was on. I'm a bit of a podcast addict, if you don't know. And we were talking about this, and my kids, for example, they're 4 and they're 7. We talked about this off air. I'm actually sitting in my daughter's bedroom at the moment, surrounded by Barbies and all this type of stuff. And that's a really important point. When we're born, and I'm an 80s baby, and when we're born, we are attributed a gender from day one. You're a boy, you get a blue t-shirt. You're a girl, you get a pink t-shirt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's no questions about that. And from day one, you're assigned a gender and a role in society. And then as you grow up, what happens is for boys, it's like, okay, be tough, be strong. If you fall down, pick yourself up. Don't cry. Keep going, keep moving, keep pushing forward. Suck it up, be a little man. You're my little man. All that type of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And the toys you get, Tonka trucks, they're little army figurines, they're whatever. It's all very masculine. Females, girls, our daughters, right? You get Barbies. I've got a Barbie next to me. I've got teddy bears. I've got unicorns, princesses. This is what we culturally assign to our little girls. You put a blue t-shirt on a girl at a young age, not many questions get asked. It's like, oh, she's wearing blue today. Cool. Whatever. You put a pink t-shirt on a boy. What's the conversation? What's wrong with him? Why have you got a pink t-shirt on your son? You should have a blue, green, black, something masculine. Why is he wearing pink? And so this comes on us as parents. And so my wife and I had this exact conversation when my son was born. So he's 7. And we kind of wanted him to grow into whatever human he wanted to be. And we actually tried to find neutral clothing colors like, whites, grays, beiges, or whatever it is, so he can explore where he fit in that space. We couldn't find anything. It was very hard, or the stuff we did find was very plain, boring, basic, and it basically stopped after 1. And then it was color assigned. And so from day one, we're assigned these attributes, and then we grow into this thing. So then when they become into school or kindy or high school eventually, that continues and it just evolves and evolves and evolves. So I came back to my story. I grew up in the 80s. I got 3 brothers, 2 older brothers, one younger brother. And so you can imagine that household, what we watch on TV, dictated by my older brothers. The Terminator, Rambo, Die Hard. These are the movies. Great movies. Like, I love these movies. But the hero, the superhero, if you can name him that, is a white guy who middle-aged and probably not much older than me, who will go through walls of fire, get shot, get stabbed, be blown up, somehow survive, but not shed a tear, not get emotional. It's just angry, and anger prevails, right? And so that's on the TV from a young age. We see this on the TV. I see it on what my kids watch as well. And even the ratings, a G rating on TV doesn't necessarily mean it's free of violence, for example. It's animated violence. And so there's that component. There's the stuff that happens at school, with your mates. It's like, oh, suck it up, be a man. The teachers even used to reinforce it as well. I played Aussie rules football. So you mentioned state of origin. I'm not a NRL fan, Queensland, New South Wales. My state of origin is actually Adelaide or South Australia versus Victoria in the AFL, but we don't do state of origin. But, same concepts.
Yeah.
And it was very much like on the footy field, we had to perform a certain way, we had to be the best. And that was driven by dad, by the coaches, and so forth. And we dare not shed a tear on the footy field because we would then be the target of a next big hit. Just like the schoolyard, if you show signs of weakness, you become the target. Because someone's weak there, I'm gonna hit them.
Mm.
All right. So that was on the sports field. At home as well, yeah, dealing with three brothers and dad, it was very masculine household. So a lot of guys grow up in this environment where it's constantly reinforced how you should act as a boy. Same with our daughters. It's the opposite. It's like, share your emotions. Tell me what's going on. It's okay to cry. We nurture that type of stuff. And we have for generations. This is not just an 80s thing. This
Mm.
is multiple generations. And so we're brought up in this environment. I also grew up in the northern suburbs of Adelaide, which is working class area. It's lower socioeconomic. There's unemployment. We were a single parent household at one point, and that's part of my mental health story as well. And so in certain environments, we also have to adapt to that environment where in a working class environment, yeah, you have to kind of have an element of toughness because you need to go out and earn money at a low pay rate, and you've got to keep grinding through just to put food on the table. It's not like we're in the affluent areas where money just comes into our laps. We've actually got to work hard for it. So there's an element of toughness there, and you can project that to worldwide. We've got wars going on. You step out your door in a war zone, you got to be tough. You got to suck it up. You got to persevere because that's survival.
Mm.
So context is really important in terms of masculinity and social constructs of masculinity. And for men, and the guys that I see in my clinic over generations, they've been taught very similar. And there's no wonder there's confusion today because we're looking at a period where we talk a lot about gender equality,
Mm.
gender pay gaps. We talk about all the different pronouns and stuff like that. So there's the identity, almost an identity, I don't want to say crisis, but an awakening of the way that we see ourselves in the world. And so a lot of guys come in and they're not sure. We're historically taught to demonstrate anger or to bury it deep. But the modern man, the 2024 man, almost wants to cry and he wants to be heard and seen and connect. He just doesn't know how to. He doesn't have the language for it. And for me, I had 20 years in silence before I even went and saw a GP about mental health. I had 20 years of symptoms that were there, but nobody saw them because I hid them very well. Because
Mm.
I didn't have the language in the 80s, 90s, noughties to talk about mental health. I didn't know it existed. I didn't know it was a thing. My physical health, completely opposite. Growing up playing footy, if I got hurt my leg or hurt my arm, straight to the physio, get the
Mm.
scan, figure it out what it is so you can heal and get back on track. I think now in 2024, we're starting to get there with our mental health in terms of something's going on. Maybe you should go to the doctor or a therapist, figure it out so you can heal, get back on track. But there's still the shame, the stigma, particularly for guys, because we just don't have the words. And this is the challenge that we have. And having these discussions is great because we can start to normalize these discussions. We can give this podcast to a guy who's been struggling, maybe in silence, or maybe who's curious about therapy or curious about men's mental health. And then maybe hopefully it puts a light bulb on inside and he goes, yep, now's the time. But we still got a long way to go. And this is just part of that ongoing work of, normalizing men's mental health discussions.
Yeah, because it's not only getting them into the clinic or me seeing anyone as well from on the female side, because a lot of people will come once or twice and then go, oh, they don't realize you don't have to come every week all the time, but in the beginning, it's quite good to have weekly appointments. And even if there's nothing wrong or nothing to talk about, that's what they pay you or me to do.
Mm.
We'll always find something. We always have a plan. All I say to my clients is you just turn up, put your bottom on that seat, and I take care of the rest. You just need to turn up. And they go, oh, but I thought I have to, when I'm driving here, I thought I have to have things to say. I'm like, no. Or I don't know if you ever hear that's one of my favorite things is I open the door and someone's like, I don't want to see you today. I'm like, great, we're going to have a good session today.
Yeah, that and everything else as well. What I love is when the guys bounce in and they're like, let's go, Simon, it's time to chat.
Oh,
And
that makes me feel that's such a nice thing to hear.
It is as a therapist and as a bloke. It's like, yes, I have the same. I have other clients who don't want to talk, and so it is hard as a therapist who knows how good it is to talk from my own story, to sit there and try to navigate that. But that's also part of the journey. It's like we don't always want to talk. Don't always need to talk, but holding that space for someone who will talk when they're ready is vital, is crucial. And this is where I guess the challenge of the modern day mental health system is, where we allocate only X amount of hours for mental health treatment, but physical treatment is there's no cap on that. Go and get as many X-rays as you want or MRIs as you want. That doesn't matter. But mental health, I think we've gone backwards a little bit since COVID, because we extended mental health treatment in COVID, but we've reduced it again. I think kind of going backwards there. So I'd like to see if any politicians are listening to this,
No,
extend that,
yeah,
because that helps us. It's not something that you can go to a therapist once or twice or three times and you're healed. Sometimes, yeah, and that's amazing.
yeah.
A lot of the stuff we're holding on to, stuff that we've held on to for decades, and that takes time to unpack. It takes time to build the rapport in a therapy sessions, and so it's challenging, but it's also really rewarding once you get to that point where they're bouncing into the door. So
Yeah, it's so nice. One of my favorite things is I hear reflected back at me, someone will say to me, "Oh my God, you know how last session you told me that thing? We were so proud of me. I did it." I think then, "Oh my God, what did I say?" And they kind of say it back to me. I'm like, "I must have had a good day. God, that's pretty. Did I say that? Well, that's pretty good." So I like that part of therapy. But what I'd really like to ask you is, you mentioned that you had these symptoms that you had pushed down for so long. If I've got a young man or a man, or it doesn't matter how old you are right now listening to this, what would that look like for someone listening right now? How they could be like, "Oh yeah, I've got that," or "I felt like that before."
yeah, I guess that's a challenging question. It's a great question, but it's a challenging one because there's so much in the mental health space in terms of diagnoses, which also crosses into disability space as well. So me saying whatever I'm about to say is not necessarily for everybody. And certainly what I'm about to say is not a treatment diagnosis or whatever. It's just my experience. And so I come at it from an obsessive compulsive lens. So
Mm-hmm.
I live with OCD. People might have heard of OCD. I live with depression. I live with anxiety. I've experienced burnout. As you said at the start, I drank to normalize my brain, if you can say that. And so for me, it started as an 8-year-old in the schoolyard. Leading up until that point, mum used to say I was always this happy-go-lucky kid. I had a big smile on my face. I was laughing. I was joking. Everything was a good time. I was in the schoolyard and a student said to me, "Simon, if you stop using your voice for more than a minute, you're going to lose your voice forever." Now, most people would laugh that off. Most 8-year-olds would just go, "You know what? That's the stupidest thing I've heard." Maybe put a few swear words in as well. Um, I latched onto that. And this is my entry into OCD. So for anyone who's not sure what OCD is, because it's often trivialized, people think, you often hear people say, "Oh, I'm a little bit OCD," or
Oh,
I'm feeling OCD today," or "My OCD is ramping up," and they use it within the context of something really small, trivial, like a personality quirk. So you can imagine this one always comes up for me because I worked in a public service, right? So a lot of PowerPoint presentations I've witnessed over my life, and even in university as well. And someone might have misspelt a word, and someone says, "Oh, my OCD is killing me because this PowerPoint presentation has got a misspelt word," something
mm,
like that. You're cringing on it, and I'm cringing just saying it. And I'm like, if only you knew my story, right?
mm.
That's not OCD. That's just you like things just to be spelt right on a PowerPoint, whatever. Everyone's heard of these kind of stories.
But hang on, I know you got to go into your story, but I don't mean to interrupt. But this is something I hear a lot, and it really frustrates me. Is because, and I can't diagnose, and I'm glad I can't. It's not my jam. Don't want to, not interested in it. But so many people I hear again, "Oh, OCD. Oh my God." For me, I hear it more around a cleaning aspect of, "Oh, everything needs to be like perfect. Oh my God, my house has to be like," I don't want to stereotype women, sorry, but sounds like I am. I hear that a lot of my house, I'm very house proud, and it has to be like this and it has to be like that. And I just go, "Oh, sit in my chair for a day, hear what's happening." But that's my own. I can't put that on, it's nothing to do with me. But I hear it's so, "Oh, I've got this." It's like ADHD, or I've got this. And it's like, no, but people say things without even realizing what that meaning is. So anyway,
Absolutely.
so your
Um,
8-year-old kid, yeah,
yeah. Well, on that, imagine saying, "Oh, I'm a little bit autistic today,"
great
or
example.
or I'm a little bit bipolar today. I'm a
People
little bit
do say that.
a little
People
bit,
do say,
yeah,
oh, I think I'm a bit bipolar.
yeah, absolutely. Or I'm a little bit schizoaffective disorder today, or schizophrenic today, or I'm a little bit cerebral palsy today. Like these are things that we don't say, like, but we do for OCD and probably bipolar. It probably wasn't the best example, but
But
yeah,
it was because you can show it in both ways. So I really
yeah,
like that example. Great examples to show people.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't generally say all those things. We probably do in the ADHD space. That's becoming one that's very much vocal in the social media. So, but the I'll give you some themes. So I'll describe what OCD is. So for anyone who's not sure what OCD actually is, it's an obsessive thought, an intrusive thought that we latch onto. And for me, it was that intrusive, obsessive thought around losing my voice. It scared the hell out of me. I couldn't let it go. It just stuck in my brain and went round and round and round, and it creates a huge anxiety. So OCD has historically been considered an anxiety condition or an anxiety disorder. And only recently it's actually been classed in the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistics Manual for Psychiatric Disorders. It's a bit of a tongue twister, in its own category. So historically, it's just been lumped in with anxiety. So it's got its own little headliner, OCD. The compulsive part, so the C in OCD, is to alleviate the obsessive thought and the anxiety and the intrusiveness of that, we have to perform a behavior or a compulsive act. And for me, it was checking that my voice still existed. And I would do that with a hum. So every minute I'd start going like this, mm, mm, just checking that my voice still existed. And I would have to do it just right. So OCD has a perfectionist level to it, and there's just right OCD, which is a theme of OCD. You have to have things just right, which kind of leads into your house maybe having it neat and orderly. You having pride over just a neat and orderly house isn't necessarily OCD. It's just a pride thing. But some people do have what's called symmetry OCD, and they have to have things in symmetrical places. I don't have that theme. If you come to my house, I have 2 kids. It looks like a bomb's hit it. And I actually like that. That actually comforts me. My wife hates it. She likes things neat and orderly. But I can find stuff in the mess, right? I guess that's my brain's trained that way. So it starts with an obsessive thought. You can perform a compulsive behavior. It's a disorder because it is time as well. So it's over an hour of your day, and it creates a huge and significant impact on you. And that's emotionally, physically. It can be around, your commitments to everything else in the world as well. So you could be late for stuff because you're doing all these OCD things. And so it started with this hum thing, and that lasted for about 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years. Where it really went to the next level is around 13, 14, mum and dad separated, and we became the single parent household. And so now I've put the man of the house hat on myself. Mum never asked me to do that. And so I moved out with mum. My little brother came with mum. We're northern suburbs of Adelaide. It's not the best area, and I felt unsafe. And I felt like we were unsafe constantly. And so this created an obsessive thought that we were in danger. So every night, for example, when mum would go to bed, she'd check the house and make sure it's locked up, go to bed. My brother would go to bed because he's younger than me, so he'd be in bed early. That's when my brain turned on, and it would say, Simon, we're in danger. You've got to protect everyone. You're the man of the house. And so, thank you, OCD. Here we go. So we go check the front door, make sure that's locked. Then we check the front window and the next window, and all the curtains are pulled so nobody can peer in, because I had this obsessive thought that someone was going to break in, steal our stuff, kill us, rape us, murder us, whatever. Yeah, bad things, basically. This mysterious boogeyman was outside all the time, just waiting to prey on us. I'd also check the iron was off, the stove was off, the fridge door was closed. I had this obsessive thought that if the fridge door was slightly open, and we had this really old 70s fridge with the seals coming off and they're really thick. And I worried that if the fridge door was open a little bit, it would catch the motor on fire, like the motor would overheat because it's trying to cool and cool and cool faster and catch on fire. And we would all burn down in our sleep. So these are the obsessive thoughts that I cannot get rid of without doing the compulsive stuff, which is the checking everything. Is it thing? And so I'd do all the round of checking. I'd go to bed, and my brain would say, Simon, you forgot to check the front door? And I couldn't just tell myself, yes, I remember checking the front door, because OCD takes that and snips it out of your brain, like memory. And so you forget, you're like, did I? You question yourself, did I check it? And so you can't then just rationalize with yourself. Your brain goes into, you must check it again, because if you don't check it, bad things will happen, and really bad, the obsessive thoughts. So they rule, they become the dominating force in your brain. And so I'd get out of bed, off I go, in the dark. This is the time before I have mobile phones with lights on them and all that type of stuff. And I didn't turn the lights on because I didn't want anyone to wake up. And so I did this in the dark, and this would last 2, 3, 4 hours every single night. And I did it quietly. So I'd tiptoe around and do this and go to bed and do it every day, basically.
Oh my God, for how long?
Well, I'm 40. So I'm 40, and I have never grown out of this. The good thing, and this is, I guess, fast forwarding back to only a couple of years ago, I have since discovered a specific treatment for OCD called exposure response prevention, which falls under the cognitive behavioral therapy space. And I've been able to reduce that to half an hour or so. So it is managing it a lot better. But for the better part of all my teenage years, my 20s, even into my 30s, like, this was a recurring everyday thing. And we talked about themes before. So OCD for me is harm OCD. This is my theme, right? So harm OCD is your behavior, or the absence of your behavior is going to create harm for somebody else or you. So I was worried that if I didn't check, harm was going to come to me and my family. And so there's that. And there's lots of different versions of that in my life, but that's the most profound one. And then another theme is pure OCD. So this is pure obsessions. And the compulsive behavior is obsessing, ruminating. So it's not physical. I'm not doing anything. I'm just thinking. And it goes round and round like a hamster wheel and gets faster and faster and faster. I discovered this in my professional career, and it came about from drinking. And so I'd go to Friday night drinks, and I loved drinking because it was fun. And we've all heard of this notion, Dutch courage. So I used to get a bit of social energy and go talk to people, and then I would always drink way too much, and to the point where I'll be dancing or singing. I'll jump on the microphone at karaoke. I'll be dancing on the stage or whatever, and everyone would love it. They would absolutely love it, and I'd have a great time. Drinking gave my brain a break from OCD and depression and anxiety. It gave me a break. It said, Simon, off you go, have fun. Go have fun.
Exhausted as well. Just think of all the sleep that you haven't had.
Yes, true.
A young boy that's growing.
Yeah.
Maybe only got 4 hours a night.
Yeah. And so I got used to that. That became my normal. And so I'm a terrible sleeper now. I'm a very light sleeper. But in my professional career as a public servant, I'd go to these Friday night drinks. I'd have the night off of my OCD. I'd get drunk. The next day, my brain would say, okay, Simon, you had the night off. Now it's my time to party. And so I never got hangovers from drinking. Like I get that from my mum. She never have hangovers, but I'd have an OCD hangover. We call it hangxiety. So it's a hangover created by anxiety. And so I would ruminate about the night before because I was worried about, did I say something or did I do something that might cause harm to somebody else or get me into trouble when I go back to work on Monday?
Mm-hmm.
So over the whole weekend, I would do this pure O thing. I could be doing, cleaning the house or going shopping, going to do sports or whatever, but I'd be doing this. I'd be thinking and thinking and thinking to the point where I would forget what really happened or what my OCD was. It's just a blur. It's a complete distorted blur. I'd go back to work on Monday and I might see the person who I thought I offended. I'm like, are they looking at me? Are they talking to me? Are they friendly? And if they were, I'm like, oh, I can relax. I'm not getting in trouble. Or I see the manager. I'm like, he's talking to me. Yep. Or she's talking to me. Yep. Oh, I can relax again. And then I'd calm after days of this. And this could bring up vomiting, diarrhea, all these gastro problems. because
course.
of the rumination and the anxiety. That's where I discovered Pure O. To give a couple of quicker examples of other themes, there's religious OCD, so excessive, obsessing about getting into heaven or hell or whatever and praying or
Oh,
doing other
really?
religious things. I don't have that. I'm not religious. There's contamination OCD, which often people hear about. So that's
In
the
your hands all the
excessive,
time and stuff?
yeah, washing your hands. You're worried about catching a disease or getting sick or you having that and passing it on to someone else. So COVID was a
Mm,
huge issue for people with that kind of thing because I'm worried about catching it or giving COVID to somebody else. And so there's a couple of other ones. There's a few other ones as well, but they're the main ones that people hear of. And so that's where it all started for me as this 8-year-old boy. It evolved over the years until 28, when my now wife said, Simon, you're drinking too much. You're doing this weird thing where you think too much on the weekends after drinking. You're not quite the guy that I met and fell in love with. You need to go get help. And that after 2 years of her asking that question, she got to a point where she's like, Simon, you either go get help now or you're out. This is done. We cannot keep doing this. And that was my light bulb moment. That was the moment where I said, I can't lose you. You're the first person who's ever really accepted me for me and not try to change me. I love you to bits. We've just bought our first home, and got into the home market as well back in Hobart. So we had this little cottage, 1920s cottage and stuff. Um, I think it's time. It's time to go and talk. And so that's where I started talking in 2012.
wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to say to that little boy, how smart are you? How smart are you to think of all those little things about the fridge and how that might happen and all the intricate things?
Hmm.
So I think the positive side of that is that you're a very smart kid.
I've never thought about it like that. And so that's really nice of you to share that because I was quite a gullible kid, a gullible
So was
and
I.
naive,
So was I.
and
Yeah, I
um,
was a
yeah.
lot. But I think that that shows that was within you no matter what. And I think how you could make sure that you were safe in an unsafe environment and you like almost a troubleshooter every night you were like it you think of the capacity, how intelligent you were to think of all those different things because you're only little.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So that
What I've,
shows, yeah.
what I've come to learn though about OCD is that yeah, it is quite a problem solving condition. Like we're constantly SWOT analyzing everything, trying to minimize risk. But going through my own therapy and learning about it, which came later in life, like only a couple of years ago, which I learned about it. Even though I was diagnosed in 2012, not a single therapist treated OCD. It was always the alcohol, it was always the depression, never OCD. And so I had to find the OCD therapist after I burnt out in 2020. I had a burnout story as well. But I found an OCD therapist and learned about these themes, but also that OCD goes against our morals. So someone with OCD can have significantly distressing thoughts, like really bad thoughts that they struggle to verbalize because they are quite sick, right? But they also know that that's an irrational thought. They know it's not true. They know that it's not them. But what it is the disorder tells them that they're the worst person in the world. And so this is often why they don't come forward and share because of, if I share this, is someone going to look at me differently? Are they going to take my kids away if I say something? Or, are they going to lock me up? We talked about themes and I won't go into it in full detail, but there's one on pedophilia, this obsessive thought that you're looking at children in a certain way that aligns you with pedophilia. At the same time, no, I'm not a pedophilia. I don't have an affinity for children. But imagine that distress that comes from that because of the stigma and shame and what we see in the media about pedophiles. So all this stuff, and so it goes against our morals, our values, and our ethics.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is part of the reason I think more broadly around mental health discussions is we can see it as being an issue, but it's also not who we are. It's just how we think. And so that's the big challenge in terms of coming forward and talking.
Mm. Thank you for normalizing that. We all have thoughts. And when you do therapy, it allows you to talk to someone that has, again, you're covered by the privacy and confidentiality side of things. That in a safe environment with the right person, you can share some of this stuff over time And I think that's quite nice to hear when I went through my own therapy journey too. Um, oh, this is normal. Or watching the therapist's face and be like, I just told you this. And she was like, so? And I think that's what I found so refreshing is when I would share my deepest, darkest secrets or my biggest fears, all the stuff that I had personally been through, which was horrible. I don't wish it on anyone. That's why I do what I do. But it was refreshing. And almost I would go to sessions testing her. Like, I've got this, I'm going to tell you. And I'd just read her and look at her and be like, huh. And she'd look at me and she goes, Barbara, the things I hear this was way before I was going to be a therapist, but she's like, things I hear on a daily basis, nothing can shock me. Because we all have been through stuff and when you normalize it. And that was such a comfort for me. Like when you're in a space talking to someone, yes, they're a stranger, but you know what? Sometimes it's a really nice thing because how many times do you get an hour or so in a week where you can sit and just spend that time on yourself, all about you, to talk about anything that you want to talk about in a safe environment that whoever's going to be walking alongside you with that, they're not going to judge you. I mean, in a perfect world, because there are therapists that do that, but let's just say a good therapist, they're not going to judge you. They will almost like say, okay, let's put everything out on the table. Let's look at all these options and decide from there. Our loved ones and our friends and our work colleagues love us, but often when they give perspective or advice, it comes from their view.
Mm.
So when we, just talking about people that haven't maybe spoken to someone before, I think the beauty about that is they don't know you. Their job is not to judge. If they do, please go find someone else. Or if you feel judged, please go find someone else because that's not okay. But you get to talk about something with someone that their role is to help you achieve or help you work through what you need to. They don't have a bias. They don't have a agenda. And I think that's a nice way of someone to be able to say, oh, I hadn't thought about speaking to someone that I don't know. Because a lot of the time it's like, why on earth would I tell someone what I'm going through? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I've had a few clients come into my service recently and they have OCD. And I love when I get an OCD referral. I love it because for so long I didn't know that anybody else in the world had OCD.
Wow.
All right. And this took until when I started Mindful Men a couple of years ago. It came from when I burnt out and I felt the need to share my story. So I created an Instagram page like most people do and started doing daily affirmations, started connecting with OCD profiles. I'm like, oh, I didn't know this existed. Didn't know somebody else lived with OCD this whole time living with OCD. And so when someone comes into my therapy clinic now, I'm like, hey, did you know I've got OCD as well? And I pride myself on being a lived experience therapist.
Yep.
Because so often when they come in with this particular diagnosis, is they've been diagnosed, but they've never met anybody else with OCD. And so the discussions that they have in therapy with other therapists and psychiatrists and all this type of stuff is all just book smarts. It's never street smarts as well. And so I don't make it about me saying, oh, let's talk about OCD. But I'm like, I can understand how your brain operates because I have that shared lived experience. And it's that shared lived experience, I think that is quite useful for guys in the mental health space. It's finding someone you can connect with, similar age or background is useful, but also someone maybe who has struggled with alcohol like I did, or someone who has OCD or depression or has burnt out, or I'm meeting some neuroaffirming practitioners recently who work in the autism and ADHD space. And so now I refer to them because they have a great understanding of what it's like to live with those kind of conditions, but also support the clients that are coming in who I can't necessarily help because I just don't get it.
Yeah.
So finding those, people where we can have that shared experience who, as you said, don't know our backstory, won't be judging, will just be facilitating an open space where you can explore concepts and issues and social constructions of masculinity or whatever it is a really empowering thing. The trouble for men, though, is that we think that happens at the pub. We think we go with our mates and we say, I'm going to go blow off some steam, I'm going to catch up with my mates, have a few drinks, we're going to have a chat, and we feel like that's helping us. And sometimes, yes, it does. It connects us. It's a social thing, but the conversations don't go deep into why am I angry? Why am I struggling with my mental health? It's very superficial. It's footy, girls, what's going on at work?
You
That's
talk
very
about girls.
generalized.
That's one thing that women have always wondered, like, do guys really share everything when they meet a girl?
Well, we talk about our families, right? And for the
Yeah.
single blokes, it's like, oh, who they're catching up with, what dates they're going on or whatever. Or, and in some groups, and I've been, particularly when I was younger, it'd be like if there's a few single guys, it's like, oh, who's at the pub that they're keeping their eye on and all that, you know, toxic masculinity stuff. You
Yeah.
know, it's stuff that's where we think we heal is through an addiction, a
Yeah.
drinking, drugs, sex, gambling, whatever it is. We feel like that's healing. But if we put that same money that we invested on that Saturday night at the pub, which could be hundreds, if not $1,000, right? On a big night out, when you think about taxis, cigarettes, if you're a smoker, I'm not a smoker, but drinking is getting more expensive. A new haircut or a new outfit. If you're staying somewhere and you're getting a hotel, like it could be $1,000 roughly. And so if you put that money into therapy, where you're sober, where you're talking about your deepest and darkest things, then you, instead of getting the band-aid fix of a night off, where I can just relax, you're getting a generation of tools, tips, strategies, processing, different perspectives. But for some reason, men and our society, our culture doesn't see value in that. They see it as that's a waste of time, that's a waste of money. And
Mhm.
some of that comes from connecting with a therapist or not connecting with a therapist, should I say. It's going into a therapy clinic or a therapy relationship and not vibing with the therapist. Maybe because they don't have the lived experience, or maybe they're the wrong therapist. If you're going for OCD, but the person doesn't even know anything about OCD, there's a whole range of reasons why therapy doesn't necessarily work. It's also
Mhm.
about your level of commitment. Are you ready to share
Yeah,
and do your homework when the therapist gives you homework? I didn't. The first 5, 6 therapists over 8 years, I expected them to wave a magic wand. I expected the magic pill from behind the counter at the pharmacy. I didn't expect to do any work. It took a long time for me to realize I actually need to do the work. And social work helped me realize that, through my studies. And then becoming a dad also accelerated that as well.
Mm, I bet. I bet. Yeah. Wow. So, how does alcohol, I think it's really important that we're talking about Men's Mental Health Week next week and stuff, and alcohol is such a huge part of culture. It's such a huge part after a hard day's work. And what a lot of people don't realize, I think they do now, but still, when I have clients in front of me, they've had a big weekend, and I'm like, walk me through what you had to drink. What'd you have? And I get really invested in what cocktails or shots. And I'm like, do you realize that the second or third day, it's why your anxiety is really high? As we drink to calm ourselves, we drink to have a good night's sleep, but it actually does the reverse of what you think it does. But it's never the alcohol. God, it makes me feel good. It blocks things out, gives me more confidence. It makes me a better person. Or the biggest thing, I don't want to feel anything. I don't want to think anything, like yourself. Totally makes sense. That's how your brain is operating 6 days out of the 7, of course you're going to have one day and blow out. It's too much.
Absolutely. And we're influenced again by culture. You mentioned at the start, like around state of origin. I think
Mm-hmm.
for many years, I'm not sure for what it is because I don't watch rugby, but the New South Wales jersey had a VB logo on the front of it,
Oh,
right?
my experiences with the All Blacks, obviously being a Kiwi, and
Yeah.
that was Steinlager.
Yeah, yeah. 4X, you see it everywhere in
Yep.
Queensland, absolutely everywhere. You see it I'm an AFL fan, so you see it all the time. It's quite a normal. You said after a hard day's work. That was one of the catch cries for alcohol marketing from the 90s that I remember. It's after a hard day's work.
But it's
Gotta
so
sit,
hot here too in Australia. So having
yeah,
a cold beer on a hot day, I get it.
yeah, absolutely. And so from that perspective, we're bombarded by it. I see the same in gambling as well. Like I want my kids to watch footy with me. I love it. I would love that. But all I see every 10 minutes is some washed up player telling me the odds about gambling. And I couldn't care less about gambling. I hate gambling.
Mm.
And I'm just like, why do I want my 7-year-old boy to sit here and try to watch football when you've got an ex-footy player telling me about the odds of who's going to kick the first goal and how much money? And then at the end of it, they say, "Oh, gamble responsibly."
Of course
If
they
gambling's
do.
an issue, like I'm like, oh my God, this is such bullshit. Why do we do this to ourselves?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a side tangent. That's another episode.
Okay.
But like
Do
alcohol,
that.
alcohol comes into us from all angles, and it's so indoctrinated in our culture to the point where if we don't drink,
Something wrong with
questions are asked. What's wrong with you?
you.
Like the pink t-shirt on the boy, right? It's the same thing. What's wrong with you? I asked that question so many times, and it's only recently that I've discovered, like, I think I was asking because I wanted people to get drunk with me so I could forget, right? It wasn't about the socialization. It was just that I felt
Mm,
less bad about my own drinking, you
mm,
know? And so alcohol for me, it started off as fun. It started off in my teens to have parties and all that type of stuff. Over the years, it became the coping mechanism. Um, when I became a dad, it really a shine was put on it, a spotlight. And for years, my wife had been saying, "Simon, you need to stop drinking because you snore like a bloody trooper when you do drink." And I'd always be like, "Oh, no, no, it's all right." So whatever. I never listened to her, and I feel really bad about that. But my kids started talking about alcohol. They're like, "Daddy, it's the weekend. You're going to drink." I'm like, "Ooh, yeah, I probably will drink, but I don't like talking about this with a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old." Yeah, that sat with me. And then my social work, I was learning about alcohol and drugs and how that all impacts us. And I understood then that alcohol was a depressant. And
mm.
then I'd be in therapy. I'd be sitting with a client and saying, "You're drinking too much. You got to stop drinking, or you need to pull back, or you're taking too many drugs." I'd go home and do the opposite.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been a hard day at work.
You're a human.
I've got
Yeah.
to drink. I've got to relax. I've got to slow my OCD brain down. So I was doing the opposite. I felt like a fraud in doing that as a therapist. And so that was part of the catalyst. But what really stopped me from drinking on my 40th was all these things happening over about 2 years period.
Mm.
But also came to my 40th and I thought, I'm going to get these amazing gifts. It's my 40th. It's meant to be like almost midlife, whatever. It's a big occasion.
Yeah, it is.
And I got presents. They were
Mm-hmm.
all craft beer. And I broke down at the end. Oh, at the start, I'm like, awesome. I love craft beer. Like, I'm going to get drunk tonight, like always. But then at the end of the night, I broke down with my wife and said, "What is this? Like, this is bullshit. Like, what is going on?" And she said, "Simon, it's the identity that people know you with. They know that you're a drinker. They know you like to drink." And I said, "I don't want to be known as that. I want to be
Mm.
known as Simon, like the husband, the father, the mental health dude, the therapist. I don't want to be known as a drinker. Like, how fucking shit is that?" Like, and so that was the next day I stopped. I said that was enough. It was that enough for me. And I'd been thinking about it for a long time because what was actually happening to me as well is I wasn't getting what I needed from alcohol anymore. I was feeling groggy, if that
You would have
makes
had to
sense.
drink more, wouldn't you?
I had to drink more.
Yeah.
I was I can notice myself slurring in my speech, even though I probably hadn't had much to drink. It was changing the way that I was operating. And in fact, we talked about pure O before. And I think maybe this is not pure O, but I remember I'd drink and then I'd doom scroll through social media.
Mm.
And I'd never comment on anything, but every now and then I might like something or whatever. Because I knew if I can't comment because I've been drinking and that'd be silly. But every now and then I'd like something. But then maybe once or twice I might send a message to someone who I knew through Messenger or something like that. And then the pure O would start. I said, "Simon, did you offend them in that message?" Or the next day it might be like, "Simon, did you comment on something that you shouldn't have commented on in a way that might come across as offensive or going to cause harm to someone?" So then I'd have to go and doom scroll again to try and remember what I even looked at the night before
Mm.
to realize that nothing ever happened. It was just my brain trying to trick me, the OCD trying to trick me. This was scaring me. This was like, and this has been happening for a little while, and this all led up to me getting sober at 40. But it's the alcohol. It's like, how do we then live without alcohol? And what helped me is identifying with other men who were no longer drinking themselves and tuning into their sober stories and hearing their sober stories. I've got a few on the Mindful Men podcast and listening to how they did it. And for some of them, it was pure abstinence. For others, it was going into rehab. And then this interesting concept came up about non-alcoholic beer.
Mm.
And now, if it's the least manly thing when you're a beer drinker for 25 years, saying to someone, "Oh, I'm going to drink a non-alcoholic beer," they think you're an alien from a different planet. They go, "Don't be such a girl," or whatever. You get labeled with these things. There's so many more guys these days, I think, and non-alcoholic beer has come a long way. I remember trying it a few years ago. It tasted revolting, but now it just tastes like normal beer.
Mm.
But you just don't have the alcohol. So you get the taste. You get this thing with the hand going up and
Yeah.
drinking. So you get the
Yeah.
muscle memory stuff.
Yeah.
But what happens with non-alcoholic beer is I can have one or two and be done. I
Yeah.
could never say that with other alcohol. I would always be the first to finish my pint, the first back up to the bar. And then what even made it worse is when they started having the QR codes on the tables where you can order from your seat. So you never have to get up anymore. You just keep
Yeah.
tapping, tapping, tapping. And so that was a bit of a mind brain issue that I had trying to be okay with being sober, but then also being okay with drinking non-alcoholic beer. But then it's also about who we surround ourselves with. So when we talk about mental health, it's about surrounding ourselves with people who lift us up, not drag us down. And for me, it's been maybe disconnecting from a few people or no longer following different friendships and creating new ones with people who are in that same, I guess, recovery process that I am.
Mm. For sure. I think there's a lot more. It's so interesting because you think about the world now, everyone's way more health conscious, but now smoking's just been replaced with vaping. So I don't know what drinking is going to be replaced. And a lot of the younger generation aren't drinking, but they're popping pills every weekend or snorting stuff, or just because they're not drinking doesn't mean that there's something else that's happening. So, but that drinking culture is huge. And who am I without it?
Mm, exactly. Who am I without it? And that's a big thing. That's a big question. And a lot of guys that come into therapy, some of them have, or actually a lot of them, they've lost track of their true identity.
Mm.
Who am I? What are my values? And I always do values-based work in Mindful Men because that's a mindfulness-based practice, connecting with who you are. So switching off autopilot of going Groundhog Day every single day, doing the same old, and actually tune into values. What do you want? What do you need? How can you thrive instead of just survive?
Mm. And I think alcohol's a love-hate. And most people have seen their parents do it. So subconsciously, it's already in their blood. Well, it might be when their mum was pregnant, back in the 80s, 70s, people were drinking when they were pregnant. So yeah, it's a tough one. And it's a culture thing, and it's a thing that people hide as well. Because again,
Absolutely.
we don't want to feel things. It's, and thank you for sharing that you were over your brain going 100 miles an hour and you needed a break. And so that alcohol was your break.
Hmm.
So thank you for sharing that, because I know it's going to land for some people. I know they're going to be like, oh. Or they'll either listen to it and be like, oh, okay. Or they'll go, I know someone like that.
Yeah.
We all do. It's either ourselves or someone that we know. So I think one of the most, I'm going to ask you this before we wrap up is, what is the most common question that the females in a guy's life ask you?
Yeah, it is a good question because I get it every day. So as a men's therapist, I say I'm a men's therapist. Not that every man needs therapy, but it's probably nice to have in our lives. Is I get phone calls, text messages, emails. People stop me in the street, because I always wear Mindful Men,
Nice.
always, to the point where some days I've got to take it off and just remind myself that I'm not, Mindful Men all the time. But
Don't
I
put
get
your phone
asked,
in the car, because people know who you are now.
well, even my car's got Mindful Men stickers on it, so I can't get away from it. So,
There you go.
but the most commonly asked question is, Simon, I know a guy in my life, whether it's their son, a teenager, particularly around from 11 plus,
Yeah.
or brother, father, an adult male, even if it's their adult son. I know that he's struggling.
Mm.
Um, he won't talk to anybody. He won't listen to anybody. How do I get him to come and see you? Because I see what you do through the podcast or through driving around in your ute or walking through the school with your Mindful Men t-shirt on or whatever you do, on the beach all the time. walking with guys. And I say, and this sucks. And I hate this question because I hate the response that I give. I said, you can't. You cannot force someone to go and speak to someone about what's going on. Man, woman, child, no matter what. I've had those referrals where I've sat down with someone and they're like, okay, why are we here? And they go, I don't know, because I've been dragged into a therapy situation. Or, I often get asked, I get invited onto podcasts. And it's interesting, like, why am I on this podcast? It always comes out after we stop recording. And it might be a female guest. And like, Simon, I had you on the podcast because my son died by suicide.
Right.
Or my brother, has struggled with mental health and I'm just trying to find answers. And so I'm like, and
Mhm.
it's the same conversation. I said, all we can do, you can't force it. You couldn't get me into a therapy clinic for 20 years, right? And 2 years my wife tried, and I
Mhm.
was this person. You can't force them, but what you can do is plant seeds.
Yeah.
And I always say this, you plant seeds, and sometimes those seeds will sprout very quickly. Sometimes it takes time and you've got to keep watering it. And so, how do you plant seeds? You share this episode of the podcast with them. You share the Mindful Men podcast with them. You take a photo of something, of a guy being happy or whatever. You send it to them. You send them an article. You send them a picture from your Instagram, a TikTok video that was just a guy being healthy and fun. You show them what life could look like. And you plant these seeds. And sometimes those seeds are an intervention. They're an ultimatum. It's like if you keep drinking or taking drugs, we're getting divorced, or you're going to be kicked out. Or, in the disability, I work a lot in the disability space, and it comes up, you're going to lose your accommodation if you live in disability accommodation, or whatever it is. Sometimes an ultimatum is needed. That's really hard. I've been in situations where people have tried to do an ultimatum with me there. And I was like, oh, I didn't know I was coming into this conversation, but here we are. And they're really tricky conversations to have. Sometimes it's enforced upon them by the legal system. I worked with guys in the family domestic violence space who have to be there because the court has said, or the police have said, or child protection have said. And they're really difficult conversations. But what we can do is we plant the seeds, whatever they look like. And I like to do it with healthy seeds. This podcast episode, give it to them. Say, oh, this is a great chat. Listen to Simon harp on for an hour or so and not taking a breath. Just listen to it. It's interesting about OCD. You don't have to be about their specific issue. It could be just like, oh, this dude talks about mental health.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's listen to that. Plant the seeds, water them regularly, check in with them all the time. Just be there. Do your best. At the end of the day, just do your best. You're not a therapist. In majority of cases, you're not. And even I've had therapists call me, say, I can't do it. And we're not meant to therapize our friends and family. Like that's the role of having it separate. Do
Yeah.
your best, plant the seeds, water them regularly. Hopefully is the key thing here. Eventually, they might have a light bulb moment where it goes, you know what? They're right. Now it's time.
Mhm.
And so then they make the phone call, or you help them make the phone call to the GP or to a therapist or to a coach. It doesn't have to be a therapy thing. It could be a life coach. Life coaching is a new thing. And I think it's really cool. There's a lot of stigma and shame around that because people say it's unregulated. Yes, it's largely unregulated. But if you find the right coach,
Mhm.
maybe with a counseling, social work, psychology background, who can grab those theories and systems and apply them in a coaching way, try that. Reiki, massage, breath work is huge at the moment. Find someone who's into breath work. Maybe it's finding these different unique things. I'm surfing at the moment, finding fun in a new activity. It doesn't have to be around talking about stuff. It could be about living differently, living more healthily,
Mm.
self-care type of stuff. So plant the seeds, water them, and hopefully it sprouts. At the same time, do your best. Reach out to services if you need them to process that as well. So it could be calling you, Barbara, and booking in with you and having a chat with you. Like, I'm trying. Work on yourself too. Like, that's important. Don't just invest it in this guy. And eventually, hopefully they get some support that they need. But it can take time because we're dealing with social constructs of masculinity. We're dealing with intergenerational stuff. We're dealing with the media. We're dealing with stigma, shame, all these types of things. But we are slowly getting there. COVID enabled this conversation, I think. it was one thing that happened in COVID that was really useful. It's let's talk about mental health. And so next week, well, when this comes out, it'll be Men's Health Week. Great week to do it because people were talking about it. Men's Mental Health Month, depending on where you are in the world. In October in Australia is Mental Health Awareness Month. And interestingly, around the same time is OCD Awareness Week. So if you know someone with OCD, great week to have these discussions. Are you okay day? Amazing day. Make it every day. How are you going? And actually care, as well.
Yeah. So many things. Thank you so much for talking about this. I can't say stuff because it's more than stuff, but your life and being a man and stepping up and being a great role model for your children and for your wife, listening to your wife and accolades for her too, for hanging in there. Like it's a team effort. We all need people around us. And at one point in a marriage, one person needs, one's up, one's down, and then you flip, and then, so that's how these things work in life. So we all need to be there. None of us are perfect. And if you're looking at someone on social media or you work with someone or you've got someone in your family that you look at and go, oh my God, I want their life. They're so perfect. Nope, that's not true. I'm sure you'll agree with me. So just focus on yourself. Focus on that. Do you know what? That you can actually live a life that is for you, that you can be you and that you're happy and people will accept you. I lived a life for other people for a very long time and wondered why I was like, my life wasn't moving forward and I just kept doing the same thing over and over again. I was like, oh, this isn't working. But at the same time, I was so unfulfilled. I didn't even know who I was. People would even say to me, oh, I come around to our house for drinks. What do you want? We'll make up a charcuterie board. Well, back then it was just called cheese and crackers. It wasn't something fancy. We're getting some cheese or crackers. What would you like? And as a grown woman, how embarrassing is it to be like, I don't know, just get what you like. Because I use my voice, people please, but also I didn't know because I was too busy living a life that I had been programmed to live for other people to keep other people happy. Didn't matter what I want. Barbara, had never had choices. So, those little things in my adult life would happen too. And I'd be like, for fuck's sake, I can't even, what wine did you like? I don't know. So there's a lot, like you said, there's little things that happen in your life. And therapy was never spoken about as a kid for me in my 20s. It wasn't until I was in mine started when I was 38. Yeah. And I went consistently every day. No, every week for about 3.5 years. And I say to people, you don't have to be like that. But I had patterns that I was like, I'm not doing this again. And that tends to happen. You either get two things. Something big in someone's life happens and they go, wow, I can't deal with this. Or you keep repeating the same things over again. So before we go, if people are listening to this and they want to talk to you, get in contact with you, say, hey, I really love this episode. Hey, next time, can you talk about this? I don't know. How can people find you?
Yeah, the website is the best place. So it's all the W's, mindful-men.com.au, which links to all my socials and the Mindful Men podcast as well. Shoot me a DM, send me an email, give me a call, send me a text, whatever it is. Share it on social media, tag us. I'm all over the socials, tag me and let us know what you liked about this particular episode and everything else. And yeah, just look after each other, yourself. Yourself comes first. You can't give from an empty cup. And as you're saying, you have all these things where you're people pleasing, trying to get this guy into therapy. Also know your limits as well. There is a point in time when you have to let go sometimes. And so looking after yourself first is important because then from once your cup's full, all the overflow can go onto the man in your life or whatever, your sons, your daughters, your sisters, your parents, whatever it is, your friends. That's really important. But yeah, thanks so much for having me on the show. I've really enjoyed
it. I think, we could talk forever.
Yes.
Because I'm learning so much. So, thank you so much for everything you've brought to this episode. I know it's going to help a lot of people.
No, my pleasure. Happy to do it again. I love talking, as you can probably guess.
So do I. So I think it'll be a dangerous combination on a podcast.
Yes, absolutely. But thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I hope this conversation has added value to your self-care journey and inspired positive changes in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing it with a friend who might benefit from this episode. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify or on your favourite podcast platform to stay up to date on future episodes. Your support means the world to me. I genuinely love hearing from you, so please take a moment to leave a review. Let me know which part of today's episode resonated with you the most. Your feedback guides the direction of this podcast, and I really appreciate each and every single one of you for being a part of this community. To fall in love with yourself is the first secret to happiness. To find out a bit more about the Studio Chat podcast, head over to my Instagram page, Studio Chat Podcast, or if you want to find out a bit more about my counselling private practice, head over to Instagram on self_care_studio. Or head over to my website, selfcarebybarbarathompson.com.au. I'm really looking forward to seeing you on the next episode. Until next time, take care of yourselves and keep embracing the journey of self-discovery.